Okay, now to the latest on the threats on college campuses right here in the United States.
Commit suicide! Run in traffic! Get out of it! Jump off a building! We ran into about all of you! Why are you so close? Go back to Go back in! Go back in! Get out of here! Get out of here! Get out of here!
Our purpose today is to educate and to show that the connection to the land of Israel didn't start just in 1948, but it really has, of course, 4,000 years of history. But at times when we are blamed to be taking somebody else's land, this is a lot more complicated than that.
A lot of people have the misconception that this conflict in the Middle East is a white versus brown problem, and the Palestinians are brown and the Jews are white.
Our family that came from Yemen never stepped foot in Europe. We are the Middle East. We never left.
Yeah.
We are from here. I'm Rabbi Gadi Capela. I went to the Jewish Theological Seminary and I was ordained in 2012. And I got the job in the Congregation Tiferet Israel on Long Island. Before I was ordained, I started another master's degree, and I had 2 courses to finish, but I got really busy with the congregation, so I had to let it go. 10 years later, I returned to school, and I take my 2 courses at Columbia. And one course was before October 7th, and the second course was during October 7th. There were demonstrations on campus that really got out of line. And on October 23rd, they organized a very big demonstration outside the gates of Columbia, and they brought all the media outlets. The demonstration was between 1 and 2 p.m., and our class started at 2 p.m. Some of my classmates came right from that. And my professor asked me to explain to the class about my family's journey from Yemen. So I was standing in front of this class with students from all over the world, and they looked at me with this blank look of, I couldn't interpret it at the time, but I realized afterwards that they simply did not know that Judaism had its brown side. They knew about the 750,000 Arabs that had to leave Palestine during the 1948 war, but they knew nothing about the plight of nearly 1 million Jews from Arab countries. They really thought that all Jews are white, and when they equate Jews with whiteness, it means that they, by default, look at us as colonizers, as an apartheid state, that we oppress the local brown indigenous people. Around the same time that about 750,000 Arabs were displaced in the events surrounding Israel's War of Independence, even more Jews were exiled from Muslim countries their ancestors had lived in for millennia. Most of the Israelis today are from Middle Eastern countries that were either exiled before or after the destruction of the first temple.
Right.
From the Babylonian time.
Thousands of years.
Thousands of years. So our history, it has always been there. On top of it, there's the connection of Yemeni Jews and other Jews from Arab countries that, even though they were forced to leave the land, always kept a relationship with the land through pilgrimages,
right,
through prayers. The land of Israel was never void of Jewish community. There is extensive evidence of Jewish settlements in the land known today as Yemen, including archaeological findings, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and Jewish oral history. It is understood that Jews have been there for about 2,500 years. The community was formed before the Babylonians destroyed the first Jewish temple in the 6th century BCE, making Yemenite Jews easily the oldest continuous religious community in the region. After the destruction of both the first and second temples, Jews yearned to return to their ancestral home, the land of Israel. Excavations in the village of Beit Sha'arim uncovered evidence of Yemenite Jews bringing their dead to Israel for burial. Yemenite Jews kept the Hebrew faith and sang the same melodies that their ancestors did in their ancient homeland. During the first half of the 20th century, there were an estimated 80,000 Jews in Yemen. The vast majority lived in rural areas and were scattered across more than 1,000 settlements. Yemenite Jews returned to Israel in small groups throughout their history, but the first large wave began in 1881. In the 1930s, Yemenite Jews established agricultural villages around the city of Rehoboth. The majority of Yemenite Jews returned decades later after the State of Israel was founded, during the Israeli-led rescue mission Operation on Wings of Eagles.
So let's start off with our family in Yemen. Can you tell me a little bit about what life was like for Jews in Yemen?
They describe a very harsh life. They had to do everything by hand. They had to go and draw water from the river. They had to start fire in order to cook. They had to pay taxes for being a dhimmi, being a second-class citizen, for not being Muslim in a Muslim country, in a Muslim land. So life was harsh physically, and on top of it, they lived in a land that, even though they were in fairly good relationship with their immediate neighbors, the law of the land saw them as second-class citizens that had to pay taxes to be protected. So very quickly, that sense of protection went into segregation and, in a sense, of course, discrimination. So in many ways, in many places, Jews had to show respect to their Muslim counterparts. So for example, if a Jew was riding on a donkey in the market and a Muslim went by, the Jew had to get off the donkey not to be higher physically than the Muslim. In some regions in Yemen, the authorities actually restricted them from owning land or working the land. Mainly it was the Arabs who were farmers. On one hand, the Yemeni authorities discouraged Yemeni Jews from being linked to the land. They wanted them to feel transient, right? But on the other hand, Yemeni Jews felt that too, because they were very pious and religious, so that they always kind of lived on their suitcases. They always wanted to be ready in 1 minute to pack up, and if the Messiah came, they would follow. So
Specifically to Israel.
Specifically, of course, to Israel.
Yeah.
My name is Yaakov. I was born in Yemen, in the village of Gerhau. My father's name is Machli. My mother's name was Mazal. I immigrated to Israel in 1951.
What do you remember about Yemen?
I remember a few beautiful things. The view, the scenery.
Do you miss Yemen?
I was a child. I don't care about going back. I would miss Israel if I went anywhere else.
When you were a kid, you had a friend. You said he was like your brother.
My friend, his name was Ahmad. He was my neighbor.
הוא היה ערבי הוא היה מוסלמי ואתה יהודי.
כן.
He was Arab and Muslim, and you were Jewish, but you said you were like a brother.
המבוגרים בעצמם גם חשבו.
Even the older people felt this way. My mother was a midwife to all the Arabs. Every Friday I would go everywhere. My parents would bring me, my neighbors would give me a jar of milk, and I would drink it fresh from the cow. We're always good friends, but it's not your land, it's something else. Ahmad and I were very mischievous. His parents were divorced, and his mother, she lived very far away. The trip was 6 hours long, and one day he said, "Let's visit my mother." We went there, we sat all day there, and there's no phone, there's no way to tell anyone, and everybody was looking for us. And then we decided to come back. There was this mountain when we were on the way back. It was like Gibraltar with all of the monkeys. A huge mountain, all monkeys.
לא הרגשת שזו הייתה הארץ שלך? Did you ever feel this was your land?
זה אף פעם אתה לא יכול.
למה?
אין דבר כזה. אתה יודע שאתה יהודי, זה לא קשור. מתנהג לך יפה, הכל בסדר.
Because you're Jewish. They treat you nicely, but you're Jewish.
אתה יהודי. אתה מבין? לא שהיה, איפה שאנחנו גרנו לא היה שום מגבלות.
Where we lived, there were none of those bad stories.
היה מחוזות, מתימן אחרים.
There were regions where you had to ride the donkey with your legs on one side. You could not spread your legs. We didn't have all those things. These things did not happen where we were. If you came without a house, they'll give you a house. They'll tell you, "Come, we are responsible for you." They'll tell you, "Nobody's going to do anything to you." They can kill each other, but they're not going to do anything to you. Once we left, they really cried.
הם מתאימים בדיוק. אז הביאו אותם. מה זה הביאו? התחילו אותם ככה.
קוראים לי אורה,
באיזה שנה?
בתימנית קוראים לי שמעה.
My name is Ora in Hebrew. In Arabic, it's Shema, which means light.
ככה בכפר.
I was born in Yemen, in a village named Mikbal, near Saada, the capital city of northern Yemen.
בירה של צפון תימן.
I don't remember so much from Yemen, but I remember the road. I remember it like a dream.
יש לי זיכרונות מהדרך, כשמזכירים לי, אז זה כמו חלום.
Everything we had to do, the trade, the job, everything was in Saada. We are a big family. I am the 6th daughter after the only son. 2 daughters died in Yemen, so we came to Israel, 6 daughters and 1 son. My parents had a much more difficult time than we did because the burden was really on the parents.
השמינית שלנו הייתה, הרי הייתה, המדינה קמה ב-48.
Why did we immigrate to Israel? The state was established in 1948, and then the Muslims started harassing us because we had a state and they took some Muslim territory. The Jews started being afraid.
פחד וזה, ואז אלה מאנשי העלייה בתימן אמרו, אם אנחנו לא נעלה אותם עכשיו, אין יהודים.
My mother's 3 paternal uncles and my father's 2 maternal uncles, who lived in northern Yemen, received permission to work the land and became successful coffee farmers. This was unusual for Jews. The rest of my family were craftsmen. Trades you could pick up and move in a hurry are common across the Jewish world. Basket weaving has been a cherished tradition in Yemen for centuries. This skill became a common women's craft in rural villages, passed down through generations. The tall palm trees thriving in Yemen's climate provided the ideal raw materials, durable and flexible fronds. I have many memories of my grandmother Saida expertly weaving and dyeing wicker in rich earth tones. She was renowned for her skill, and her oldest daughter, Senia, became her protege. The baskets are still used in traditional ceremonies and celebrations, like the henna, a Jewish Middle Eastern betrothal ritual. Baskets are filled with candles and flowers, carried above the heads of participants accompanying the bride. When I had to write about my parents' immigration from Yemen in the Immigrant New York class, the assignment was to take an item that your family brought with them. So I immediately thought about this work that was identified with the Yemenite Jews, and it comes in many shapes, and they created containers of dry food that then brought on the way. But my family would have to leave it all behind as the Arab world began persecuting their internal Jewish communities after their resounding defeat in Israel's War of Independence. Operation On Wings of Eagles was one of the most complex rescue missions in history. Leaders in the large Jewish community in Sana'a informed their brethren across Yemen that it was time to return to Israel. Letters were sent to Jewish community leaders urging them to prepare to leave. Communities throughout the country began organizing their departure. Many believed that the Zionist movement and the establishment of the State of Israel were signs that the Messiah had come. This long-awaited return parallels the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. Jews of Yemen were not just fulfilling a historical destiny, but were also experiencing a divine promise of redemption and renewal. And they too would have a dangerous trek through the desert before they would see the promised land. And then when 1948 came and the Sochnut, the Jewish agency, came to Yemen to try to get them to come to Israel, my father said that they showed them literally the temple. And they said, this is the moment that we were waiting for.
Oh, wow.
And they packed up. 40,000 people came between 1949 and 1951.
Did they also feel pushed out like a lot of other Jews in the Middle East?
Right. In 1947, a year before Israel was declared a state, the UN declared the partition. And at that moment, the Arabs, Muslims in the diaspora started really being oppressive towards Jews. And that was a moment that was, again, that's the two sides of the same coin, that they wanted to leave and they were pushed out.
Maybe they wanted to leave because they were pushed out.
One of the very important examples of disunity, of oppression of Yemeni Jews was the Orphans' Decree. According to the Orphans' Decree, Yemeni Jewish children, if unmarried and if their fathers passed away, so sometimes their mothers could still be alive, would be considered orphans and would be forcibly integrated into Muslim Arab society through conversion and through often torture, forced marriages, very serious things. You see the emergence of networks of Jewish people across Yemen who form this sort of underground railroad to smuggle orphans out of Yemen and to Aden and then to Palestine.
My family story is that's why, for example, my grandparents were married at 12 and 13. So bat mitzvah and bar mitzvah age for them was being adult altogether. So it is that maturity. So they would try to marry them as soon as possible in order to avoid that orphan decree. Before the long journey, everyone in my family gathered at my maternal grandparents' big stone house in Haidan to prepare for the one-way pilgrimage. My parents are cousins and went through the Exodus together. When they began the journey, my father, who was 7 years old, had to walk. My mother was only 5. She rode in a basket strapped to the side of a donkey with her younger sister on the other side. Almost all Yemenite Jews walked on foot through difficult paths, for weeks and months, selling their belongings for a pittance. Hundreds of people perished along the way, leaving behind no documentation. They were forgotten to time. My parents' wealthy uncles sponsored orphans so they could escape Yemen. Later, they raised some of the children they helped when they arrived in Israel.
We went through the desert, the Hudaydah Desert. There are no Jews, no Arabs, no Muslims. It was a desert. There was no water. All the people settled in barns and stables. Since they didn't have water, they took it from the sea and boiled it, and they only saved the water for the children. They took us by truck, but they had to split us because they didn't have room for the whole family. So they split us. Our driver saw that there were no trucks behind us. He said, We are going to torture them, so we'll rob them and then throw them into the desert. He wanted a bribe from my mother, and she gave him our jewelry and our shoes. We were the only family that had shoes because my father was a shoemaker. He worked with leather. And he took the bribes from my mother. She had some money and bundles, so he got everything. Then he kicked us out of the truck and left us in the middle of the desert. But we had some luck. One of the trucks behind us got a flat tire and they were delayed. So all of a sudden, they were behind us. One of the family members saw us and she said, "Stop here." The truck driver didn't want to stop. My father had an axe and said he was going to use it. "I don't care. I'll kill you. You have to stop for my family. If not, I will kill you." Everybody yelled and shouted, so the driver stopped. They picked us up. The next event was that they stripped all the children, and they wanted to see if the parents hid money on their body. So my father put money in my bread. I said to my father, "No, I don't want to eat," and he said, "Don't eat it, but hold on to it." So when they stripped us, I put my bread on the side. But when we left, I forgot the bread. My father was looking to see if I had the bread, and I ran back to get it. I grabbed it, and then he was very happy to see that I got the bread. And the third story is that my father had a rag that was very dirty and stained. He sewed money into it, and every time we reached a roadblock, he threw it on the ground so nobody paid attention to it. And after the roadblock, he picked it up.
I interviewed my parents and my extended family, and what they were talking about is some sort of a dichotomy in their relationship with the Arab population in Yemen, that on one hand, when they left, their neighbors cried and was very sympathetic. They were in deep friendship with their local neighbors, but yet when they had to leave, they really encountered a lot of stumbling blocks, and sometimes literally. They had roadblocks in their way, and in a sense that they would have to pay ransom in order to cross the hurdle, and they called it khashaba, that they would cut the tree. Literally, khashaba means the trunk of the tree, and the Arabs would collapse a tree, and they couldn't move through, and then they would have to pay ransom to cross. Finally, they arrived at the British Protectorate of Aden, to a displacement camp at the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. This was the only area that was under British authority.
When we got to Aden, we had to stay there for 8 months. We weren't supposed to stay there originally for 8 months, but because of what happened in Europe with the Nazis, the Jewish agency said they will give priority to immigration from Europe. So we had to stay there for 8 months. So many people died in Aden because of the conditions.
It was crowded in the transit camps with very poor sanitation. My 2 eldest cousins died of thirst. My grandparents took menial jobs while waiting in Aden. Some Jews thought they could rely on their savings until they left for Israel. Over time, their money dwindled and poverty made their lives unbearable.
Nobody wanted to fly us. They asked all kinds of airlines, and finally, Alaska Airlines agreed.
When Yemenite Jews were finally flown home, the planes reminded them of a prophecy in Exodus, "I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." Yemenite Jews with black hair in traditional side curls traveled millennia in time to the new Jewish state, flashing from antiquity to modernity. When Yemenite Jews arrived in Israel, they faced a harsh reality. They didn't feel that the Messiah was there. Not yet, at least. They lived in wooden shacks without running water, with 9 people to a room. They worked low-wage jobs and had to deal with constant wars. Most of my family settled in the Yemenite town of Rosh Ha'ain and in the Yemenite neighborhoods around Rehoboth, where I grew up. My parents still quote Arabic wisdom. My father worked with Arabs, and we played with their children.
So this is the second annual event to commemorate the day of expulsion and departure of Jews from Arab countries and Iran. We started the first one during last year's semester, that was during October 7th. And when my professor asked me to speak about the Jews of Yemen, or the Jews of the Middle East, I realized that my co-students really didn't know much about it. So we created this event called the Indigenousness of the Jewish People to Israel.
I realized for many years that I've gone to schools that my education was Eurocentric, but I never really paid attention too much because there was no immediate consequence to it. And at Columbia, I realized that when they are ignorant about it, and they keep shouting those slogans about Jews being white colonialists and the apartheid week that Columbia permitted their students to have, trickled down. And that really was a direct result of their perception that we don't have roots in the Middle East, and let alone in the land of Israel.
So I would like to just take a last quick question from the audience. And the question is, how can we change historian to think different and give credit to all ethnic Jewish?
Events like this.
Event like this.
Unfortunately, the Middle Eastern Jewish voice and their Zionism have been systematically silenced. The Jewish world does not promote enough the stories of nearly 1 million Jewish refugees from Arab countries and Iran, who are native to the region and indigenous to the land.